So Ubisoft have made another free-to-play shooter game, this time in the form of an arcade 6v6 FPS akin to COD, rather than the attempt they tried to get into the Battle Royale market with Hyperscape. Announced nearly 2 years ago, XDEFIANT is Ubisoft's latest attempt at getting into the casual arcade FPS market. The project is being led by Mark Rubin, who is one of the main producers of the original Modern Warfares as well as Ghost. So it's not like this game has someone with no experience at the helm. The combined expertise of the team as well as the seemingly unlimited funding of Ubisoft should amalgamate to shape a great shooter that can compete with your likes of COD, right? The game presents itself in a way that strongly contrasts the drab and dull tone of modern shooters. The game is built with vibrance and colour taking centre stage, every map is bright and colourful, and I can actually see enemies and where I'm meant to be going. Each and every area on each and every map have a distinctive look and feel. It looks great. Saying this, I did have an issue where my game was super saturated and gave me a headache. It was something to do with HDR auto turning on, even though I don't use HDR in Windows. Anyway, I digress. The graphics are quality, although the note to write home about. The meshes look decent, the UI I'm actually a huge fan of because it's super sleek and clean, and the player models look detailed. I'm pretty sure that a lot of the assets in this game come from other Ubisoft games like Ghost Recon and the Division games. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, they're gorgeous looking games. It also means that the team can focus primarily on the gameplay, which is all that really matters in a shooter game. Graphics don't determine a game's quality. Speaking of gameplay, that's where I feel this game sort of falls apart, for me anyway in my opinion. The game is in beta, so of course this is all subject to change and some issues I mentioned will probably be already getting fixed or tweaked, so keep that in mind that all of this can be remedied at any time. I'm sure that this is just a beta issue, but the connection and desync is terrible. I've been getting shot around corners from people I wasn't even aware of because they didn't appear on my screen. Sometimes it felt like my shots weren't registering, a skill issue maybe, but it felt that way. The servers are iffy at best, having to spend an excessive amount of time just pressing the spacebar hoping to get into the game, instead of getting hit with the Delta error, got old pretty quick. This has gotten better though throughout the beta, so far anyway. What hasn't gotten better though is the matchmaking times. It takes a fair while to match you up with anyone and get you into a game. My matchmaking times were averaging 3 minutes most of the time, which just ain't great. I find it odd that the matchmaking isn't sub 10 seconds considering that there's no skill-based matchmaking whatsoever. Mark publicly voiced his disdain on skill-based matchmaking, and he seems to be following through with his words. Back in the days of pub stomping and having everyone in the same meat grinder, whether that's for better or worse. Progression is also very unstable, as in my weapons couldn't level up, so I was rocking a bog standard M4 during my entire play sessions. There was no point in using a custom class either, because that would be reset every game. My guess is the servers weren't communicating properly and just kept resetting my loadouts back to what they thought was most recent. I'm no network engineer though, so don't take that as gospel. On a good note though, the cross-play connection seems to be fine, there's no complaints there, everything seems to work as intended. As with all cross-play shooter games, the big debate about aim assist comes into play. Is it too strong? Is it unfair? Does it make every controller player a pro? Well, surprisingly it isn't too strong in this game, with some even claiming that it's too weak. From what I can gather though, it seems rather quite balanced in the sense that if you have a controller you still have to put in some effort, but it's not weak enough to argue that a controller has a disadvantage. The gunplay is something that others seem to be happy with, but it just doesn't click with me. The guns feel static and sound toyish, and the recoil is super odd. I can't speak for controller on this, but on keyboard it feels horrible. It feels randomized. I like games where you have to learn the recoil patterns like CS, I guess. Again, it could just be a skill issue, as others seem to like it, and I seem to be in the minority of this. Most guns are pretty weak, especially pistols. They have the power of a super soaker. Everyone seems to be using either the M4, the MP5, or the Vector. I've yet to see any other gun be used. In fact, maybe the odd AK once in a while. Another part of the gameplay loop is the operators. The game has 5 factions, each having 2 abilities from a variety of Ubisoft's other IPs such as the Cleaners from The Division or DedSec from Watch Dogs. Variety is the spice of life, but this game's soul tastes bland. When it comes to the operators, that is. There's a clear-cut defined best class you can pick, that being Libertad with the self-healing gadget. With the TTK being incredibly quick, it's almost a necessity to run healing, to even have a chance at recovering. I guess you could just run away, but what's the fun in that? And that nicely brings me on to my next point. The movement is in a weird place for me. It feels like it should be quicker, but it's not slow, unlike Modern Warfare 2. I think the speed should be increased to match Cold War, to hit the sweet spot. I find the fact that you can move directionally in the air a pretty interesting new mechanic that I don't think has ever been in a COD to my knowledge. There's a lack of proning in the game, meaning that drop shotting is non-existent, meaning sweats don't have another crutch to keep their 0.9 KD intact. I say that knowing slide cancelling is back, and all you'll see in clips is people sliding, jumping, looking down at the floor, flicking left and right, claiming they're a movement god. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Overall, I think XDEFIANT has a promising future. It's not perfect by any means, and I do think further refinements are very much needed, and that balancing would be a boon. It did sound like I wasn't enjoying the game based off this, but I'm just providing my feedback. It's a beta after all. Things aren't going to be exactly how everyone wants it, or else it wouldn't have been released by now. So yeah, that's essentially it. Thanks for watching. If you like this, then feel free to subscribe, and if you didn't, then yeah, I don't know.